Congrats on getting beyond $1 million. What got you here won't always get you there. This is a podcast for entrepreneurs who want to reach beyond their 7-figure business and scale to 8, 9, and even 10 figures. I'm Brad Weimert, and as the founder of Easy Pay Direct, I have had the privilege to work with more than 30,000 businesses, allowing me to see the data behind what some of the most successful companies on the planet are doing differently. Join me each week as I dig in with experts in sales, marketing, operations, technology, and wealth building. And you'll learn some of the specific tools, tactics, and strategies that are working today in those multi-million, 8, 9, and 10-figure businesses. Life can get exciting beyond $1 million. Brian Will, awesome to meet you here on the trip. We are sitting in Antarctica, and I'm sorry for you because you don't get to see the window. We tried to play with the lighting, but it's not happening. So we'll enjoy the view in the meantime.
Yep. I appreciate you having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, definitely. It's super fun to carve out the time. For the sake of background, one of the things that I think is really helpful is to understand kind of at what level people are playing at and what experiences people have had in life. And that for me is always a guide of, should I actually believe what they're saying? or should I act on it, right?
Sure.
So you sold your first company a long time ago at this point.
1999.
Awesome. So can you give a little backdrop of what the company was and at what scale it was at?
You know, that particular company, back in the old days, prior to the internet, literally, I got in the insurance business, and back then we had to go essentially door to door, face to face. We called it belly to belly.
Oh, belly to belly insurance sales?
Yeah, so we were selling health insurance back then, and it was a belly to belly. So I would have to call you up as a customer and see if you would want me to come see you, and I'd go out and visit your home, and half the time you wouldn't be there. And if you were there, I would sit down, and half the time, then again, I would find out that you're either too sick or too old, and I couldn't sell you an insurance policy. And then half the time that I would sell you an insurance policy, we'd come back later and find out you lied to me, and you were too sick or you were too old, and we still didn't get the policy done. And so your success rate at the end of the day on what you get paid on was very small. The challenge we had back then was, in my particular case, you have to do, both marketing as well as sales. And when you're marketing, that means you have to answer the phone so people know, you're there. They can call you, you answer the phone, you can set appointments. When you're out on appointments, you couldn't be home to answer the phone. And so I got into the business of selling insurance and very quickly realized that the system was extremely inefficient. And I remember thinking to myself, if I didn't have to actually go out and see the customers, I could stay home and I could just sell them over the phone, then I could make more money. So I literally hired this guy, Andy, and I would sell the customer over the phone, and Andy would drive around and pick up the applications and sign them and get the checks and bring them back to me. This was like the first step. By the way, I think most successful companies are a progression of ideas. You never really know where you're going to end up when you start a lot of times. But if you look at the end result and you back up to where you began, you realize that there's a progression of ideas that keep moving you into the next level or the next phase, right? So my next level was Andy driving around doing all the work while I sat home. Well, this was successful, and I got to thinking one day, if I could get rid of Andy, I could make more money, right? So I called this insurance company that I was working for, and I said, hey, instead of going out to see a customer, we have this new thing called a fax machine, and it's legal. So can I just fax paperwork to people, and they fax it back? And they said, well, we'll give you a little test on this. We'll let you be the guinea pig on this system. So we started faxing I would sell it over the phone. We'd fax the application to a client. They would fax it back to me, and then I would fax it into the company. It worked. We ended up building in 1997 the second largest agency in the country in health insurance for Assurant. And I'm competing against guys with 400 or 500, agents across the state or the country. And so what we had essentially created was the very first call center environment to sell health insurance. Hadn't been done before. Well, in 1999 rolls around and the internet takes off. eHealth Insurance jumps in. Simply Health launched in Atlanta with a $30 million venture capital investment. And they were trying to figure out how to sell insurance online. And I was the only guy in the country that had a little call center, so to speak, even though we're doing it by fax. And so we got acquired. We went from selling insurance face to face to, me hiring Andy, me firing Andy, me hiring another guy, and then somebody to do the paperwork. And pretty soon I was doing nothing to selling to this .com. And we launched the first online insurance portal, which was simplyhealth.com.
I want to ask a question about how you think about the progression of things. And so that's always, and I want to keep going with kind of the specifics of the next business, because the next one was relevant to this. But there are people, like we're on the boat with Cameron Harold, who's a good friend of mine, and his cornerstone concept, I think, is a vivid vision, which is this trademarked idea of you need to paint the picture in vivid detail for the next 3 years specifically, and push that out to everybody. Which could work in alignment with, or could be totally contrary to the statement of things evolve over time and you figure it out as you go. How do you look at sort of the vision statement, et cetera?
I think he's exactly right. But the part that's missing out of that is you also need to be able to improvise and adapt along the way. Too many people get locked into their vision and fail because they're not willing to improvise and adapt and adjust and move and, you know, change directions, even if it's slightly. Too many people lock into the vision, and that's what gets them in trouble. It's absolute clarity. You have to have absolute clarity in what you're doing. But as Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan to get punched in the face.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So you got your clarity, you got your vision, you get punched in the face. Maybe you need to go right or left instead of straight on and keep getting punched in the face.
Oh, yeah.
So all you're doing is adapting the clarity or adapting the vision to where you're continuing to go.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, okay, you were selling insurance through fax machines, which I have to think that the paperwork on those things was fucking terrible by the end of the chain of faxes.
Well, the problem was most people didn't have fax machines. So I would literally we would look up where they lived and we'd find a grocery store or a bank or some other place. I'd say, okay, now I'm going to send you directions to get down to the Super Duper, and the Super Duper's got a fax machine. They'll charge you $1 a page. And we would get people driving all over town sending us faxes.
That's amazing.
It was crazy.
So you sold to a .com, and were you still involved at that point when you sold?
Yeah, they brought me in, interestingly enough, and this is one of the challenges with, and particularly in my life, I've got no education, didn't go to college, got kicked out of high school, managed to graduate, went into the military. So when I got bought by this venture capital company, even though I was the basis of the entire company, the first thing they told me is we can't put you on the website, and we can't tell anybody who you are because you don't have an MBA.
Wow.
So they demoted me in my own company to a sales manager and brought in a young, sharp MBA to take over my company.
Wow.
Which was hilarious, but that's the way it worked back then. Incidentally, after several months, I went from the big corner office to a cube about this big, literally, in the cubicle row. The CTO of the company and I got together, and we decided that this online insurance portal that we were building to sell retail would be better sold to carriers and allow them to use it as the back-end system for all their agents in the field. And so we ended up developing a company called Connecture, which was the backbone at the time for online health insurance sales at the carrier level. So if you go to an insurance carrier and you'd sign up, you're basically using one of our products. They ended up shutting the entire resale side of Simply Health down, took Connecture public, and today it's the backbone for Medicare.com. So Medicare.com, 1-800-Medicare, that's all that company we built.
Crazy. And also, I think, speaks to the idea of roll with the punches and adapt as you go.
Well, it's a progression. Who knew when I decided to do faxes that one day we would be selling the software to an insurance carrier to power their 10,000 agents? Who knew?
Clearly,
but you're sitting there and you go, you know what? We could do this.
Yeah.
Let's roll that way. And so you move and it works.
Yeah. So ultimately, that software company you sold to.
It went public and then it went back private again. So I don't own any of that. I found that most of the companies that I've built and sold got much larger after I exited because that's not who I am. I'm the builder. And much like I think Cameron said, when somebody's willing to give you money, you take it.
Yeah.
So I took my money when I took it, and then these venture capital guys or these private equity firms would take it to the next level.
Well, I think that's the hope in life, is that you find the synergies, right? The relationships where people effectively do the things that you don't, and then you're both happy to have that exchange. 100%. Right? Then it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
Whether they quote unquote overpay or not, as long as everybody's happy with the exchange. Perfect.
Exactly.
Okay. So when did you wash your hands of that business? When did you move on?
I got out of that business and didn't know what I was going to do. Quit working for about a year or so, and then decided I wanted to do it again. So I started another online insurance company. The internet.
No non-competes or anything?
No, I bought that out.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we launched another one, but at this point, the internet was really rocking and rolling, and most of the lead gen was done online as opposed to the old days we did it with Yellow Pages. Like I had Yellow Page advertisements in 13 cities and 6 states, and that's how I generated my leads on the first company. Mm-hmm. Well, now all of a sudden you got the internet out there and people are cranking out leads. So
and when is this?
This is 2001.
Okay.
Weirdly enough, the first day we started that company was 911.
Oh, wow.
Like I went in that morning, started doing a sales training with a bunch of folks, and everybody's phones are blowing up, and finally somebody answers the phone and like turn on the TV and the towers were coming down. That was day one for that company.
Crazy.
So we launched that company and we're doing really well, but I was buying leads from all these different lead vendors out there. And it turned out that the people who owned my building were a lead vendor company. And so I got to be friends with the CEO of that company. His name was Steve. He turned out to be one of my best mentors in life. And Steve said, we need to do a deal. And I said, let's do a deal. He said, all right, I'm going to launch a new company and we're going to do lead gen for the insurance space as well as a little bit of subprime space. And I'm going to run the internet side. You're going to run the insurance side, and we're going to build this sucker up and go with it. And I said, okay. So now I've got an internet company and an insurance company. This is 2001, 2002, 2003. So here we are rolling along, and this is one of my favorite stories. And the first year in the internet business, we had dropped about $500,000 into it, generated zero revenue. I mean, zero. And I remember my CPA comes in, it was right before Christmas. He comes in to see me and he says, Brian, you need to shut the internet company down. It's going to bankrupt you. It's sucking all the cash out of the insurance side. You're not making any money. You're barely paying your bills. The internet thing is killing you. Shut it down. So I'm freaking out. I go home. I'm talking to my wife at the time, and I'm like, I want out of this thing. I'm done. This internet thing is, I don't know anything about it. I'm not an internet guy. I'm an operations guy. All I know is we ain't making no money. Mm-hmm. So I come into work the next day, and my partner Steve comes and he sits in my office. And mind you, Steve's probably made $20 million at this point, and I'm struggling at making $100,000. Mm-hmm. And he sits down in his holy t-shirt and his dirty shoes, and he drives a pickup truck, and he says, hey man, we're going to put another $66,000 in this company. And I was like, Steve, we ain't made no money, dude. He goes, don't worry about it, Brian. It's going to work. I'm like, we ain't made no money. Like none. Like zero. Like I'm going bankrupt. And he's looking at me and I'm freaking out. He goes, I'll tell you what, Brian, I'll make you a deal. I'll give you your equity back in your company. You give me my equity back in mine, and we'll walk away as friends. No muss, no fuss. We just walk away. All good. But I need to know right now. So here I am sitting at the desk, my desk. And you ever had one of those days where that ping pong ball's going back and forth, like I'm in, I'm out, I'm in, I'm out, I'm in, I'm out. And I just told my wife I'm out. I went out of this thing but then I looked over at him and I'm thinking, here's a guy who's made a crap load of money and I ain't made none. I sold my first company, but by the time you pay taxes and pay off your house and buy a nice car and do stupid stuff, the money's gone. Typical first time sale guy. And I finally looked up at him and I said, you know what, Steve, I'm in. If we're going down together, I'm in. And he goes, all right. I don't ever want to hear that again. He gets up and walks out of my office. And now you're sitting there like, shit, what did I just do? That was in 2004. 2005, we hit. We do $6 million of revenue, pay all the money back that we had borrowed. Next year, 2005, we did $22 million in revenue. Mm. And we rolled into 2006. We hit $32 million in revenue and we got bought out for $50 million. Actually, it was 80, but we got 30 on the back end we never got, but we got 50 million cash. So literally almost 18 months from when I said I'm in, we cashed out for 55 and change.
Congrats.
Yeah, it was, and I have a tattoo that says I'm in, by the way.
Oh, I love it.
Just to remind me that, and this is the whole premise of the beginning of my book, is sometimes you need to rely on other people's experience and knowledge and ability. Take your ego out of it and listen to somebody who's actually done this before. And when I made that decision, my whole life changed.
Wow. I love that. So I think there are a lot of things there. One is obviously what you just said. The other is what changed in the year that you did 6 million. Right?
We were experimenting. Improvise and adapt. We started off with this, we did this, we changed advertising. I don't know anything about it, but they kept changing and changing and changing and changing until they hit. And we hit it actually in the subprime credit market back prior to when they regulated it so heavily. So what changed there? I have no idea. I'm not an internet guy, but they figured it out. And when they figured it out, it just went crazy.
And that was specifically lead gen?
Yeah. So we were an aggregator. We would, like, if you're a credit card company and you wanted to sell subprime credit card, you'd come to me. I'd build all the online marketing for it. I'd go out to my publishers over here who had email lists. We were an email marketer essentially prior to Can Spam. And we would say, you know, how much you give me to sell just to get an application filled out? And you'd say, I'll give you 12, you give me $12. I'd go over here and I'd say, all right, I'll give you $6. And so they would drop email on our offering. Applications would get done. You'd give me 12. I'd give them 6. I had no skin in the game. We're doing 12, 15,000 of these a day at the time. It's just pure profit.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Then you create all this data in the back end that we were selling, but we were dropping 200 million emails a day at the time and selling our data. Our data alone was generating 800,000 a month in revenue for nothing, just selling it to people.
Yeah, not the leads?
Just the data.
Got it. And what was the buyer for the data?
Other emailers.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah, so we might drop 200. Somebody else would drop 200. It would not be crazy to think that we drop $500 million a day between us and everybody that we would sell data to.
I would say that, yes, that does sound crazy.
Yeah. This was prior to Can Spam. We, can't really do that today.
Yeah. No, you can't, but it's super interesting to listen to, those things and think about how they apply today, right? And what those channels are where you can get those kinds of impressions and get that kind of exposure.
Well, the funny thing is Steve started doing telemarketing. And then he moved into the internet, and then we moved into email. And then after that, we had to, so again, it's just a progression to keep this company rolling along.
You've said a couple times, I'm not an internet guy, which I think is hilarious. It's kind of like saying that you're, not a paper and pencil guy or like not a clothing person. Like, you have to be an internet guy at some point.
Well, let me clarify that. I don't know anything about how it works.
Yes, fair enough.
Right. So my entire history in business is I really know no idea how these businesses work. That's not what I do.
Yeah.
I'm an operations guy. We've talked about this a little bit. I'm a P&L guy behind the scenes. I know how to run operations, legal, marketing. That's what I do. But building websites, don't have a clue. Programming, don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do any of that.
So from an operational perspective, what changed?
In the internet company?
Yeah.
We had lots of cash.
Okay.
We had lots of cash. You can do good things with that.
Yeah. Yeah. No question about it. Did you do anything differently when you had lots of cash? So like, one of the things about, I think, figuring it out at the beginning is the stress that you articulated for putting that extra 66 grand in. I think it's typical of anybody that's starting a company that's bootstrapping, right? You're at this place and you think, shit, if I don't spend this money right, it's gone, and I don't know if I'm getting any more. So I need to make sure I spend it right.
Been there.
And as you get more, right, there's less pressure on making the perfect decision because progress is more important than perfection.
Right.
Right. And certainly progress is more important than just sitting with your hands under your ass hoping that something's going to happen. Right?
I find too many young entrepreneurs end up, and this is many times a fatal flaw. They get into this mindset that the business has to be everything and their personal life can suffer. And the problem when you're in a scenario like that where $66,000 is the difference between, or even $1,000 or $2,000 is the difference between you paying your mortgage or putting it in the business. I see guys put that money in the business and not pay the mortgage. The problem is when you do that, it creates a psychological issue and that you're now behind the 8 ball. And you've created so much pressure on yourself that you can't function, and you start making decisions that aren't in the best interest of the business or not in the best interest of you. And that turns into a death spiral. So one of the things I've said in my book many times is you need to take care of yourself first, because a non-functional you can't be an effective CEO or entrepreneur. If your life is in such a wreck that you don't know which way is up, your business is probably also in a wreck. It's like I tell my kids, dirty room, messy mind. Right? If your room's messy, your mind's messy. If your mind's messy, your life's messy. You got to keep your personal life in order for things to, to really succeed at your business life.
I think that's super valuable in general. And there are lots of different variations of that across different personality types, right? Some people seem to be able to operate in the chaos. And like, Jesus, my mom just has stacks of shit all over the place. But in her head, they're organized in some way.
I'm like that.
Yeah. It's just like, no, I know it's in that pile over there.
Yeah.
right?
I hate it when the cleaning lady moves my shit.
Yeah.
She moved my shit again. I can't find it.
Right. Don't make me look
she
for it.
She stacks it all up in piles, like,
Okay, so you sold that. I know that you then decided that you wanted to fly planes. Because, I don't know, some people really like that.
Well,
one of those people?
I was in the Air Force for 4 years, the Army for 4 years. When I was in the Army, I was a navigator. So I always wanted to be a pilot. So after we sold the company in 2006, I bought my first plane, and I've been a pilot ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
How much time did you take off between the sale of that and being a pilot and hanging out?
In
Before you got into
2008,
something else?
it was interesting. In 2008, when we sold the second company, we sold one in 2006 and we sold one in 2008. I remember I didn't know what I was going to do. I was going to quit. I always said, I've probably tried to quit 3 or 4 times. My brain won't let me. It doesn't stop, right? But I remember I was sitting at my partner Steve's office. He had started another company and I was sitting in there and we had just sold, we were very successful. And I said, listen, Steve, I want to come to work for you for free in your new company. Just teach me how to do this internet thing. I know we just sold one, but I don't know anything about it. So I'm just going to I'm going to sit at your feet and you teach me how to do this. So remember, I set my whole office up and I'm sitting there first couple of days and I get a phone call from one of the insurance carriers that I had used to deal with. And the woman who was the head of sales for the insurance company, she says, what are you doing, Brian? I said, nothing. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. She goes, well, we have a problem. We have a call center. They were in Milwaukee. She said, we have a call center in Minnesota and it's losing about $1 million a month. It's a direct to consumer call center. Will you come up and take a look at it for me? Tell me what you think. And I was like, okay. I mean, remember, I'm the kid that got kicked out of high school. No education. Here's a multi-billion-dollar company asking me to come in and tell them what's wrong with their company. I said, well, okay. I mean, I can do that. She goes, well, how much money do you want? I said, I have no idea. I don't know. She said, well, it's going to take about a week. How about $100,000? And I was like, yeah, that sounds good. And so I hang up the phone. I walk into Steve's office. I said, you're not going to believe somebody just called and offered me $100,000 for a week. I'm like, he goes, you sold 2 companies. You are now an industry genius. Irregardless of whether you know anything, people now think you're really smart. I was like, okay. So I remember telling my wife at the time, I'm like, do you remember when we struggled to make $100,000 a year? Somebody's going to pay me that for a week. That's insane. So I went up there and I spent a week and I said, basically, you have 7 problems with your company. And she says, come see the CEO with me. So we walk into the CEO's office and his name was Don. And Don's like, what's up? I said, I got my PowerPoint presentation, and I'm like, problem number 1, problem number 2. I get to problem 3 and he goes, all right, can you fix it? I said, well, yeah. He goes, Laura, figure out how much to pay him. And we walked out. I'm like, okay, how much do you want to pay me? She's like, why don't we, so we build this whole structure. I ended up making about $750,000 that year in consulting fees. And I was working a week a month.
Yeah, that's
and I
awesome.
flipped their direct-to-consumer division around from a loss of $1 million a month to profitability. Well, now I'm even more of a genius, in the industry, and I became the go-to guy for direct-to-consumer in the insurance field. So I got called into Chicago, and they were building a 1,000-seat call center up there under the first Obamacare thing, and I ran that for a year and built it up. And then I got a call from Portland, Oregon, and they said, please come help us. This company is now owned by Allstate. Come help us build this thing. We went out there and did that. And so I consulted for several years, had a lot of fun doing that. And then I was like, I don't know what to do again, So I started another little company, raised a couple $1 million, which at this point was easy. I literally could pick up the phone and somebody would give me $1 million. Right? It's a progression in life, right? Did really well that first year, but unfortunately the Obamacare thing fell apart. So, at that particular time, and after we had invested a couple of $1 million, the insurance carriers came and pulled the commissions out of it and said they weren't going to pay us for all the work we did. So I basically shut that company down and walked away again. And then I didn't know what to do. Wrote a couple books, went diving. I call it chasing passions. Just everything people say they want to do in life, but they never actually do, which is not really the group we're with now.
Yes.
I started doing that, right? Travel the world, run with the bulls, walk the Great Wall, cage diving with great white sharks, fly, climb mountains. I'm a dive master. So I started doing all those kind of crazy things. And then I bought a restaurant. And now I have 6. I've had 12. Now I have 6.
Yes. I love that. Well, it's going to bother me if I don't ask. What did you get kicked out of high school for?
My first book I wrote is called I Give the Dumb Kids Hope.
That's fantastic.
Not a very PC title.
It's fantastic.
I get some flack online for that.
That's great.
But the story behind it is that my kids went to private school, and a very expensive private school. And this private school would give my kids like tons of homework every night. They'd have homework for 3 or 4 hours a night. And I used to get in these arguments with my daughter because she'd be up till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning doing homework. And I'd like wake up at 2 o'clock. I'd come out and there she is laying on the kitchen floor doing homework. And I'd be like, you need to go to bed. You can't function like this on 2 or 3 hours of sleep every night. One night we get into this argument and she says, Daddy, you're not supporting my educational goals. I have to get good grades, get into a good college, get a good education, get a good job. And I said, honey, it's not that important. She said, you're not supporting my educational goals, Daddy. And mind you, here we are living in a 10,000 square foot house. I have a beach house, a lake house, an airplane, 2 boats, wave runners. I don't work. And I said, honey, it's not that important, because if it was, how do you explain me? I got kicked out of high school. She goes, Daddy, we were talking about this in school the other day, and we decided that you give the dumb kids hope. Right? So going back into the beginning, I was raised in a very abusive home, and I was angry and had a chip on my shoulder and didn't like authority and didn't like being told what to do, didn't care. I was the kid. back then we called them latchkey kids, right? From about the 3rd grade on, I'd wake up. My mom and stepdad were gone. They were at work. I'd get myself ready. I mean, we're talking 3rd grade here. I'd get on the bus. When I got home from school, I had a key on a chain around my neck, which is where latchkey kids came from. And I'd come home, I'd be by myself till 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. So by the time I got into high school, I literally did not care about anything. I without getting into a lot of what happened to me, I was not in a good place. And so I just didn't go to school. My junior year of high school, the first 90 days, I skipped 42. And then I didn't go to the midterms. And back then they didn't have computers. They had paper records, and somebody apparently went in and looked at my records and realized I wasn't going to school. And so they called me in and they said, you're out. I always tell the story. This was the first time I've ever sold anything in my life. And so I was like, well, shit, I can't get kicked out of school. So I went in to see the principal and I said, hey, if you will let me retake the midterms like on the next Monday, if I get a B, you let me stay in school. If I get anything less than a B, I'm out of here. He's like, deal. I studied. I came back the next week, took all the midterms, got all Bs. And he said, well, I'm going to put one more qualifier. You're never allowed to miss another class or you're out again. And I said, okay. So I ended up graduating the next year, but I was pretty much that close to being gone. And at the time, I really didn't care that much. The only thing I cared about was I pole vaulted in high school. I was pretty good. I wanted to do that. So that was really my motivation. I wanted to be a pole vaulter. That's what kept me in school.
That's an awesome story.
Yeah.
Pole vaulting's always been fascinating to me. It's a very strange sport. But
it is about goal. That one goal kept me in school.
Yeah.
That's what made me stay. It's something I wanted to do.
I think that oddly ties back into clarity of vision also, right? So you didn't know the path, but you had this vision of, I want to be a pole vaulter for whatever reason.
Right.
And you wanted to compete, right? And so everything else formed around that one place that you were trying to go.
It was the only reason I stayed, only reason I graduated. Then I was my senior year, I was skipping class one day and the guidance counselor comes by and she says, what are you doing? I'm sitting on the stairs. I said, I'm in school. I was told I couldn't not show up. Nobody told me I had to go to class, right? And she's like, well, you can't skip class, so come with me. There's an Air Force recruiter here. And so I said, all right, fine. So I go see this Air Force recruiter and he does this presentation. And man, these guys in a little video film, they're monster guys with big muscles and their teeth are bright white and women are falling all over them. So anyway, I watched this video. I decided I'm going to join the Air Force. Next thing you know, I'm in the military. So that's how I got in the military. So the kid with a bad attitude who didn't like being told what to do, of course you join the military.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I've thought about, I have a lot of overlap in my youth, a lot of delinquent behavior. And I thought many times about the military. And I think that there's just some allure to the perceived badassery of it. for the rebellious kids. And I don't think it's that uncommon.
Well, it also provides structure in life that you don't have as a child. And I'm reading a book right now, King, Warrior, Magician, and Lover. And it talks all about, what it takes to become from a child to become a man. And it takes structure. And this is why gangs are formed. And this is why people go in the military, is you lack that structure in your life. And it was a good thing for me. I needed that structure.
So there's no question that after the fact, and I'll tie this back into business, but no question after the fact that we see that, right? But as a child, certainly for me, it wasn't that I was seeking structure.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So it just, but there's tons of benefit to the military from a business perspective, and having discipline and routine and structure is a huge one of them.
Huge.
So if I have opportunity to hire somebody that's been in the military in any capacity, they get an extra point, right? The likelihood, and certainly not true that they're necessarily going to be good,
right?
But there's an extra likelihood.
They get an extra point.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm going to consider them a little bit further.
Yeah.
How do you think how does that play into training people when you bring them on?
One of the things that we learned in the military is that every training should be done at the 5th grade level. And I've trained thousands of people over the years through my companies and through consulting in sales and management. Everything should be taught at a 5th grade level, because too many times when people are talking, you've probably met people like this or watched them. They talk so far above everyone that the people that they're talking to don't get it. And here's one of the things we know about people. So if I'm having a conversation with you and I say something that you don't understand, what does your mind do?
I'm gone.
You stop.
Yep.
Because your mind's now saying, what did he just say? And you're trying to figure it out in your mind. You're going through the motions. But the problem is I'm still talking. And so you're trying to figure out what I said a few minutes ago. And by the time you re-engage with me, you've missed the last 3 or 4 minutes of what I've said. And I tell salespeople this all the time. That might have been the most important thing you needed to say, and they weren't listening to you anymore. So you can't talk above people. And when you do, you tend to lose them, and this is how you lose a sale. So the military taught us, 5th grade level, very simple. When I write my books, they're very, very basic, right? That was probably the biggest lesson I got out of the military from that perspective.
That's awesome. How do you think about the structure of the training itself? So the military is a very regimented organization, right? Does that play in one of the things that and I bring this up because one of the things that you told me very early was and I want to get back to the bars and restaurants in a second, but I asked you if you liked the businesses, and you kind of gave me this. It was business.
You asked me if I like a restaurant business.
Yes, that's what I said.
It's a business.
Yes, the business that you have.
Yes.
And you said, it's a business.
Right.
And so to me, when I think about the lessons that you may have gotten from the military, one being teaching people at a 5th grade level, how do you think the rigidity in your approach to business, and you talk about running things from the P&L, running a P&L, what's the overlap there? Is there a tie? Do you think that you learned that structure from the military? Do you think that you had that innately?
I don't know. I mean, obviously, I think the military brings that structure. I tend to break things down into very small pieces, the same way they teach you in the military, right? It's very small pieces. It's small sections. I need you to learn this section. I need you to get good at it. And then we're going to move on. You also do this when you teach people. So I've watched you do it, and you've probably not noticed, but now that I say it, you'll watch. Even when I talk to you, I'll say something to you, and then I'll stop. And I give your brain a chance to engage with what I just said before I go on to the next thing. So, for instance, we were talking earlier today, to give you an example, and I was talking about the restaurant business. And one of the things I threw out there were some numbers, right? And I said, look, your labor needs to be 28, your food needs to be 28, your liquor needs to be 22, and your rent needs to be 10. And then I stopped, because I want you to process those numbers before I continue talking. Otherwise, you're not going to listen to anything I said after that, because that's some technical stuff that you need to digest. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So that's the way you teach. And even when the next thing we always tell people when you're teaching is, they're going to remember 30% of what they hear, 50% of what they see, and 80% of what they put into practice. So whenever you teach, you should not only talk, but you should write. And not only write, but then you should, we'll do sessions where people come up and actually do it themselves, because once they engage with the idea, the retention goes through the roof. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very much.
And this is why I tell people in sales training all the time, the more you talk, the less they hear. If they're only going to retain 30% of what they hear, then you need to shut up, say a few important things, and then stop. Otherwise, they're not going to remember what you said anyway. And I do this drill with people, which is interesting, right? You want to do a drill?
Yeah,
I'll give you the drill. Here's a drill. It proves my point. I'm going to give you a little string of numbers, and then you're going to repeat them back to me. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
10, 45, 63, 82, chicken, 14, 17, 4, and 1. Can you repeat that?
No. 10, 45, 82.
But what will you remember now for the next
Chicken.
2 years?
63 chicken.
Why?
It's different than the rest.
And what happened to your brain when I said chicken?
I laughed.
You stopped. Your brain locked in on chicken.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I said after chicken, you have no idea what I said.
No, it's true.
Because that's the way the brain works. It latches onto something that is different or odd or catches your attention, and that's what it's going to remember. And that's what you need to understand in sales. When you sell something to somebody, you better find out what the chicken is. And that's all you need to know.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And periodically people say things to me and I'm like, I'm going to write that down. I have all the ridiculous memes in my head of all the people I know. Mm-hmm. And it's, you better find out what that chicken is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll give you another one that's interesting that you said earlier, and I wanted to pick up on it here. Chapter 1 of my book, we talk about your filter, your personal filter. Everybody has a filter that works in their subconscious that is controlling your life because it's either accepting or rejecting information as it's coming at you, and it does it in real time, and it does it without you even thinking about it. Okay? So one of the comments you said was, I want to get to know somebody a little bit so I can find out if they're full of shit or not. Because your filter is now engaged. Okay, I have my bullshit filter on, and it's going to reject anything that you don't believe to be accurate or true, right? Well, that filter is something that's been developed throughout your entire life. From the minute you were born and your parents were telling you things and teaching you things, and you went to school and your teachers were teaching you things, which, by the way, they got from their parents and their teachers. And then you have friends, and peer pressure kicks in because of the things their parents taught them that came from their parents and their teachers. And you become an adult and you go to college, and all this stuff that comes at your brain your whole life. Every book you've ever read, every TV show you've ever watched, every podcast you've ever done, sitting here listening to me today. Your brain is accepting or rejecting what I'm telling you based on that history. Mm-hmm. And that filter that's in your brain is either going to create success or it's going to create failure. And the example I use is, do you know anybody in your life that you go, that guy can't win to save his life? Mm-hmm. And you know somebody else and you're like, geez, everything he touches turns to gold. And the reason is because that filter in their brain has been trained to either be a success or a failure filter. And that success or failure is based on everything they've done in their life. And then when new information comes at them, they either accept or reject it based on whether they think it will provide value or whether they think it won't. What you said, I'm going to find out whether you're full of shit or not. Right? So we all have this filter. All of us. And it's just operating there in real time behind the scenes, right? The problem is and you talk about somebody who's going into business, the problem is if you've never been successful in business, your filter has no idea how to be successful in business. And so it's taking information that maybe you're a successful father, or you were successful at your job, or you're successful as a mechanic or whatever, but you don't know how to run a business. You don't know how to run a P&L. You don't know how to operate. One of the things that I talk about, the reason people fail in business is their ego, right? If you have never been successful, then you don't know how to be successful. You just don't. And if you get lucky and become successful, good for you. That's probably not going to be a long-term successful thing. But if you continue to fail over and over, all you're doing is creating a failure filter in your own head that's going to continue to morph, and you're just never going to make it, right? One of the things I find missing in business people is that they are too ego driven. Mm-hmm. They think they have all the answers. Mm-hmm. They think they need to be everything to everybody, to everything inside their business. They're unwilling to take advice. And if they do take advice, they're unwilling to follow all of it. I've given advice to people, and they'll take half my advice and half they won't, and they come back and say, that didn't work. I said, you didn't listen, right? Yeah, I did. No, you didn't. You did this, but not that. Mm-hmm. Or they don't take advice at all. Or they think, I just need to do everything because that's just, I know how to do it better than everyone. And I don't know if I did this with you or not. You have an iPhone?
Mm-hmm. I have some iPhones.
Made by Apple, right?
Yes.
Who runs Apple? Tim Cook.
Yes.
Tim Cook's the CEO of Apple.
Yes.
$3 trillion company. Most successful company in the world. You know, Tim Cook has a board of directors. And what do?
Tell him what to do.
They come in and they give him advice based on their filters, based on their knowledge, their background, their experience. They come in and say, you know, each one of them said, based on, you know, my background, this is how I think you should make these decisions. And he thinks you should do that. And she thinks you should do that. And Tim Cook sits with his board of directors probably every quarter and gets advice from all these people on how to run the biggest, most successful, most profitable company in the world. If Tim Cook needs a board of directors to help him make decisions, what makes you think as a new or young entrepreneur that you can do it all yourself?
Yeah. One of the things that I think is that I see happening as people move past the creation of the business mode into, you know, multi-million or multi-8-figure or 9-figure is the divergent paths of, I see these divergent paths emerge of the ego getting bigger or the ego getting smaller. And somewhere along the line, and I think this is something that humans probably struggle with forever, right? Their whole life. But somewhere along the line for me, part of my ego started to erode once I was comfortable with my own level of success. And that allows me, it gave me permission to start to fucking listen to other people and recognize that I was saying things as if I knew, because I was wrapped up in my own ego. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to look successful to people. And the irony, of course, is that almost all successful people, and I think most people in general, just want the vulnerability and appreciate it so much more when you just get to the truth of a situation and say, oh, I don't know how to do that. And you can say, that's awesome. I do know how to do it. Let me tell you about it. But you never get there if you don't just let go of the ego.
I think there's and you know, these psychology tests they do, they call it your learned traits and your natural traits, right? So early in my career, my learned traits in colors, I was all red. Like if I went under stress, it was all me, all my decisions, do it my way or the highway, get out of my way, you know, whereas if I'm comfortable, I turned more into blue, which is let's be collaborative and let's make decisions together and let's make the best choices going forward, right? The problem is that when you're a young entrepreneur and you're stressing over that couple $1,000s or that $66,000, you're all red because, you know, if this thing's going down in flames, you know, I have to be in control. I have to do this. I have to. And yet when you're comfortable, when you have enough money in the bank and, you know, this isn't going to break you, it's now you can be more collaborative in your efforts. I think that's exactly what you're talking about. It's learned versus natural. It's a whole different world when you have the resources to the point that whatever you're doing isn't going to affect your life. Right? I know that if I put $100,000 in a business today and lose it, whatever. Just built this restaurant. I sunk $500,000 into it. If it fails, okay. I look at the lease. I have a 3-year guarantee on the lease. It's $250,000 a year. So that'd be $750,000. Okay. I don't have to stress over the fact that this is going to ruin my life, my family, and my future. Which makes me way more collaborative in my decision making.
Yeah, that's a great lesson. I didn't think about it, or I haven't thought about it that way. But what I've started to realize is that, and this is, I think, in the Venn diagram in the middle somewhere here, that also allows a controlling person to be more comfortable delegating or empowering others. Right? When you know that the mistake that could be made by the other person isn't going to be catastrophic.
Right.
To you personally.
Not going to ruin your life.
Yeah.
People that work for me, like we just closed a restaurant and they were like, oh my God, how do you feel about it? I'm like, didn't work. You know, whatever.
Yeah.
Or something bad happens and they'll be like, why aren't you excited about this? Well, because I can look at my entire life and tell you every bad thing that ever happened to me was literally a stepping stone to something better. I didn't see it at the time, and you have to go far into the future and look back to actually see the progression. But every bad thing turned into something better. Every time. Now, whether that is a law of nature or that it's just the fact that I take that negative, I learn, and I move on, you know, we can argue that point. I tend to think, you know, you ever heard this? You have to fail to succeed. It's like a cliche, right? I've heard people say, oh, just keep failing and failing and failing and pretty soon you'll succeed. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Because the critical piece they're missing is the learning piece. You have to fail and learn. Every failure should have a post-failure assessment of what happened, why it went wrong, and what you're not going to do in the future. If you're not doing those post-failure assessments, then you're just going to go make the same stupid mistake again. You're back to that filter issue, right? So it's fail, learn, succeed, which is my whole life. Fail, fail, fail is just dumb.
So you've referenced your book a couple times. What's the book?
This one's called The Dropout Multimillionaire.
Awesome. Yep.
Because anybody can be a millionaire.
Yes. I do like the first title, though.
I give the dumb kids hope.
Yes. So, yeah, it's fantastic. So people want the book. I assume it's on the normal book channels.
Amazon, Kobo, or all that stuff.
Cool. Out of curiosity, did you self-publish it?
Well, we created a publishing house, actually.
Got it. Interesting.
In order to get onto the bigger lists. So it's a Wall Street Journal bestseller. It's a USA Today bestseller, but you can self-publish, but you still have to go through a publishing house. I learned a lot about how to publish books in the process of doing this.
Sure.
The first version of my first book was horrendous. And then we figured out something, so we made it better. And then we wrote the second book, and then we were like, okay, we need to create a publishing house so we can go legit on this deal. So we created a publishing house called Bookmark Publishing. So we launched under Bookmark Publishing, but that's really us.
Awesome. Cool. Are you public online? Where can people find you? I know more about it.
The Dropout Multimillionaire is on Facebook and Instagram. I don't do a heck of a lot of social media.
Yeah.
I haven't figured out what I want to do with the book yet. I originally wrote this book because I thought I've watched so many people start businesses and fail, and I've watched so many companies that are in business that can't seem to figure out how to make money. So a statistic from the IRS, only 42% of small businesses make a profit in any given year.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Only 42%. Also, 500,000 people a month start a new business. That's 6 million businesses a year. We know that 70% of those will fail within 24 months. So you have all these people that with all these big ideas and ambitions, and they want to go out and do something, and 70% of the time they're going to fail. And even if they don't, only 42% of them actually make any money. And so I said, there are very specific reasons why people don't make money. And mainly it's because they don't know their numbers. They don't know what they're doing. And we saw a perfect example of this at breakfast this morning. Mm-hmm. If you don't know your numbers, you are destined to fail. You better know your numbers backwards and forwards. You better understand how to read a P&L. You better know where that money's supposed to be, what it's supposed to look like, what percentage it's supposed to be at, or what the heck are you doing?
Yeah. So the book is grounded in that?
It is. It started off trying to be lessons on specifics of building a business, and about halfway through, I came to realize that most failure in business is mental and not technical in nature. So first you got to find out why you're doing this. Then you got to find out who you are inside the business, right? Are you really an entrepreneur? Are you really a salesman? Are you really a technician? Or are you just a guy that knows how to do the work? And you try to think you're going to start a business and be successful. That's why most people fail. So why are you doing it? Who are you? Who are you not? Who do you need to bring in to fill in the gaps in that business, right? And then you got to get your mind right. You got to get somebody to help you. Get a mentor, join a CEO group, join something where you can get other people's input to help you. Find out if you have a viable business or not, and you'll have a much bigger chance of succeeding. So the book is a lot more psychological in nature than technical.
Yeah. Well, I think that we both know a lot of people, and you see people routinely, that there's a misconception that you can not have a somewhat successful business and still not really have product market fit, right? There are a lot of fucking people on the planet, mm-hmm. and you can do a really shit job of starting a company and get it to $1 million, a couple million, mm-hmm. a few million a year, mm-hmm. And still really not have your shit together mm-hmm. at all. Mm-hmm. So I think that a lot of those things are highly applicable at sort of the later stages of business as well as the beginning. And in fact, I think they're more relevant at the later stages of business than the beginning, because when you're starting things, it's very common to focus on the wrong things. And I know people that I refer to myself as a recovering perfectionist. And I know people that are, ready, aim, mm-hmm. aim people. Mm-hmm. And part of the challenge, I think, for a lot of people of getting in that place of I need to make sure all of these things are completely correct mm-hmm. and accurate and perfect mm-hmm. to move forward, is that they never move forward.
And you're right, they should, but they better learn along the way.
Right.
You better be
fail
learning.
and learn.
Yeah. Fail, learn. I used to joke I graduated from FLFLS University. Fail, learn, succeed.
I like it.
You know, because I failed a lot.
Yeah, I like it. Well, today, the most recent journey is you have 6 restaurant bars, and they're just a business.
Got into politics.
Yes.
Got a couple more books coming out.
I love it. Cool.
So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate you carving out some time, man. I'm glad we got to sit and talk. And
it was awesome. Hope I didn't ramble too much.
No, it's perfect, man. I think there are great lessons for people that are continuing their journey beyond $1 million.
Yeah. Find somebody who is 5 or 6 steps ahead of you. Take their advice.
I love it. Well, that's a great note to end on.
All right, brother.
Cool, man. Thanks for taking time.
If you learned one thing on this episode, share it with another entrepreneur. They need to hear it. Also subscribe so that new episodes just show up on your phone. It's a lot easier that way. And if you want the really good stuff, check out our free BAM! Tactics and Strategies course. It's where we curate the best tips, tricks, and tools that our guests know, whether they've shared them on the podcast or not. Just go to beyondamill.com. You'll also find previous episodes and show notes at beyondamill.com.